Hey there guys, hope you're doing well. Beautiful day here. So, I love my little dump trailer here. It's really useful around the property, but one issue I run into is that the walls are just too low and I need to make some taller walls. When I'm carrying things like wood chips or tree limbs, this low sidewalls just don't let me carry enough. So I'm just gonna remake some sidewalls and show you how I'm gonna do it. There's only a few pieces I need to remake. There's a back wall. There's two identical sidewalls. There's two posts that go at the back. And then there's a front wall that just drops in. So 4 walls and 2 posts. And I'm just gonna jump into the workshop and get going. I'm gonna make the corner post now. So basically, there's just a piece of square tubing, and then set inside, there's a solid piece of steel about that long that gets tapered down here. It has a shoulder so it can insert into the tube, get welded in, and then this skinnier part drops in to the bed of the trailer. So I'll start by cutting out some 3-foot sections of tube and getting these bottom pieces milled out. I'm cutting 3-foot sections of pipe because that will be the finished height of the walls and the posts. To make the pins, I'll start by turning down a piece of round bar to the diameter that will fit snugly into the post tubing. Then I'll cut the 4 pins out of that one piece. Then I can throw those back in the lathe, turn down a shoulder so that the bottom skinnier part of the pin fits down into the trailer bed. So now I've got the 4 posts and the 4 pins, and the large side fits in nice and snug into the end here. And so what I'll do is about halfway up, I'll drill a hole in each side, enough to get a weld in, so I can weld through the pipe onto here and just flatten it out. So those will get welded in place. So here's all 4 ready for welding. It's just slid right to the edge there. There's a hole on each side just to weld through. So they're welded in. When it's cooled off, I'll just come back and grind that flat. And then I was just going to mention, if I didn't have access to a lathe, I probably would have taken just some standard round solid bar, sleeved it inside of a pipe, done a similar welding to this, and then again sleeved that whole thing into here. So I'll just let these cool off, grind them flat, and then I'll set them aside. I'll be adding the clips later on once I've got the sidewalls in. So these are done for now. So I've taken all the measurements off of these. All I'm doing is extending the height. I've made a cut list so that I can make frames out of square tube and then just lay the sheet metal on top and weld it all together. So I'm just going to start by cutting the sides out from the sheet, and then I'll build the frames to fit them. So that's one sidewall. I'll go ahead and knock out the rest now. Now that I've got all the pieces of sheet cut out, I need to cut out the square tubing to weld up the frame. I've used the dimensions off the original walls except for the height, which I've made 3 feet. So I've got a cut list, and now I'm going to cut out all the pieces and get them prepped for welding up the frame. So here's all the frame pieces cut out. So now I'm just going to clean them up, remove any oil, rust, and clean up the ends, ready for welding. So now all the frame pieces are ready. I've wiped them down from oil and ground the edges clean for welding. And then this is one of the sidewall pieces. And what I'll do is I'll just start assembling one of the frames right on top of it. By doing it right on the sheet of metal, I'm making sure that it stays square, because I know this is square, and that all the edges fit flush. I have these long pieces marked out at thirds so that I can just drop in these reinforcing bars here. Okay, and now I can just go around and clamp the whole thing up. So now I've got the outside corners all clamped. It's nice and flush to the edge of the sheet, so I'll go ahead and tack these in place. So now I'll go through and I'll clamp up these. You could do it all at once, I just don't have enough clamps. Okay, then I'll just tack all these in place. Okay, now the frame should be sturdy enough now that I can take all the clamps off, and I'll just slide it off so it's overhanging, and I can get 3 sides of this frame welded. Then I can slide it off the other side, do the same, flip it upside down, get the last seam. Okay, so that's the frame welded up. I'm going to grind off the tops of these welds just on the top back so I can flip it back over and it'll sit nice and flush on this plate. So now I can flip this. I'll give it a second to cool down, but I'm just going to re-clamp it, re-line it up, clamp it in place, and then I can stitch weld the plate to the frame itself. Okay, so this is nice and cool now. I'll start by clamping this one corner, get the edge lined up, and clamp it right out on the corner. So then I'll go to the opposite corner, and I should be able to just pivot the frame back and forth to get everything lined up, get this corner clamped, and it should be lined up all the way around. So now I'll just go through, add the extra clamps, and then I can tack it up. So as I'm going around, I'll just make sure that the plate is pressed firmly against the frame wherever I'm doing that weld. And I'll just be I'll get the corners, and then I'll be stitch welding, say every 8 inches, 200 mil, something like that, just to attach it. So when the sidewalls are installed on the trailer, the plate is actually on the inside of the frame. So the weight of any cargo is actually pushing the plate into the frame. So that's assisting us keeping it all together. So just a stitch weld every 8 inches or 200 mil or so should be sufficient for this. So here I'm just hitting each corner and then one right in the middle. I'll go around and knock out all the outside welds right now. So now that I've stitch welded around the whole perimeter, I'll add 3 stitch welds down each reinforcing bar. So now the frame's all welded down to the sheet. Next thing to do is to go ahead and add the angle iron, which is what holds the sidewalls up against the post. I'll just go ahead and clamp this in with the top plane flush against the frame here. Just like that. And I'll just throw on a couple stitch welds for now. Eventually, it's quite structural, so the entire seam will get welded up. But I want to do all the test fitting before I do that, because I don't want to take that step if one of the measurements is slightly off. So I'll just put a couple stitch welds in, finish all the doors, test fit them, and then come back to finish off those welds. I finished the 2 side walls and the back wall, which are the 3 sides that swing open and closed. So the front wall is a little bit different. The posts are actually welded straight onto this, onto the sides, and the whole thing just drops down into the trailer. Before I weld these on though, I need to install the drop catches, because I won't have access to get them on once the posts are welded on. So now I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes for this. I need 3/4 on one side, or 19 mil, to be able to get a socket in to tighten it down, and 12 mil on the front to be able to install the threads. So I'll put those holes in now. So I've put a center punch mark in to get my hole started, and I'll use a step bit because I'll be able to drill through both sides and keep the holes perfectly aligned. So that's 3/4 on one side, and I can just flip it back over. And finish off the other side. So now the holes are drilled, I can install the drop catch. I've got a 12 mil hole on one side, and I've got a 19 mil or 3/4 hole on the other side. And what I'll do is put the drop catch in the small hole side, take the nylon lock nut, drop it in the large side, and then I can just rotate the drop catch to engage the threads. Once that's on, screw it until the nylon engages and the nut will stop turning. Then I can just take this small piece of flat bar, this is 3x12 or 1/8 by half, stick it down in, which will wedge the nut still, and then I can just rotate the drop catch to tighten the nut. Once the nut's just about fully tightened down, I'll take the drop catch, put it in the finished position, and I'll go back 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn, and I'll stick this back in. That'll allow me to really tighten down that last little bit. So now this is fully tight in the top dead position, ready to weld onto the side wall here. Both of these posts now have their drop catches installed, so I can go ahead and clamp them in and tack weld them. I'm just going to tack weld these before I test fit this, but once this is in, I can go and test fit the whole wall system and then just come back and finalize it. Okay, this should be ready, so I'll go and test fit everything. So it's all fitting together pretty well. A couple little adjustments, and then I can come to the holes through the angle here and mark onto the post exactly where to put the drop catches. And then while these are in place, I'll go ahead and mount the attachment here, which is basically a piece of tubing that slides over this, and then just a piece of flat bar that connects the two. And just to make sure everything lines up perfectly, I can just weld it all together while it's installed. So I'll go ahead and add the drop catches to the post, put it all back together, and come back and weld these. I've got all the drop catches installed, and all the doors are fitted and in a good position. So next I'll get the hinges on. So now for the hinges, I'll just take some thick walled pipe, 2-inch sections, and get those cut. So I'll take a piece of the tubing and just slide it onto here. I'll line up the flat bar I'm going to be using. take a measurement so I can go and cut these pieces. Then I'll go ahead and weld these two together in the shop and then bring them out here and weld them in place here. So I'll just take this now, slide it on, put it in place, hold it right where I want it. So I'll just do the rest and then they'll be ready for painting. To reinforce the holes that the drop catches go through, I'm going to take slices of the Schedule 40 pipe, probably about 3 mil or 1/8 inch thick, just slice them off and weld them right around the hole. So I have all the rings cut out. I'll just give them a quick little file, just taking off any burrs on the edges. Then I'll just lay it right down on top of the hole. That's it. I'll do a test fit, make sure everything's working, and then finish out those welds. But same thing here, just clean it up with a file, drop it right on top, and weld it in place. So I finished up all the welding, got the rings added, made any last little adjustments. I'll do one last test fit on the trailer, and then it's just time to paint it. The welding's all finished now. I've gone over all the corners with a file to take down any sharp edges. They're just about done. Last thing to do is throw a coat of paint on. I'm just using a really heavy duty metal paint, and I'm just gonna slop it on and really build up a nice thick layer. Then I'll hang them in the ceiling, be able to get the back and the bottom, and let it dry overnight, and I'll install them tomorrow. So here it is, all finished. I've just been using it for the first time, and I can fit so much more in here, which saves me a lot of time and fuel, making multiple trips. I can almost get about 3 times as much stuff in it. Overall, I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Pretty simple metalworking project with some basic metalworking welding skills. Definitely something I'd recommend considering if you've got a trailer that just won't carry as much as you want it to. All right, time to get back to work and finish clearing this brush. If you enjoyed watching the video, please give me a like. Subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Thanks for watching.